Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today, I'm joined by somebody that I found out of the Twitchverse, and we actually met each other on somebody else's Twitch stream, and now here we are getting to hang out and record a podcast episode. I am joined by Brad Carter, aka Brad Carter Gaming, or you might know him from BnB Anime Podcast. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, Brad.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It's nice to actually sit down and put a voice with the name that I've chit-chatted with on Twitch for a good little while now.
It has been a while because I remember when Blue was just starting out, and I'm speaking about the Twitch user Blue Lavender, who was on the podcast earlier last year, I believe, and we met each other through her stream.
And that's honestly where I found her as well. I ran into her with her Stardew Valley stream back whenever she first started playing, and then we both kind of bonded over anime, and that's kind of how our whole podcast situation started. But yeah, so that's kind of how I found her as well.
Yeah, it was crazy because like there's a point in time where I couldn't get to everybody's Twitch channels because it's the same story of there's too many things to watch and you have to kind of pick like what you're going to watch. So I tried my best to pop in to her streams, and then I'd pop in and be like, "Oh, wait, you started a podcast. Holy cow, like just out of the blue."
Yeah, and it was kind of like a last minute decision on our end because we just constantly talked about anime in our spare time because I'm one of her moderators, and so we talked on Discord a good bit, and we just both found out that we have such a passion for anime, and we both wanted to be voice actors. So we thought, why not just make a common outlet for one, so people can kind of get like an idea about our voices for our voiceover careers and whatnot. But also, it's just an outlet to talk about I guess, art form is kind of how you want to look at it, or a genre, however you want to describe it. But yeah, it's just something to where we can just talk about something that we both absolutely adore.
Absolutely. That is the one great thing about podcasts is there's always a podcast out there for everybody to listen to, and there's always people wanting to talk about pretty much if you like it, there's somebody out there that will talk to you about it.
Oh yeah. That's one thing I've noticed because I've listened to a good bit of podcasts, and specifically anime ones as well, because there are just certain things where I'm like, I don't know if I would like that or not. So why not listen to somebody talk about it and see if it is right up your alley?
I know that there are definitely animes that I have tried that are not up my alley. Even as much as I love the people that recommend them, I went back to them and I said, I didn't dig what you guys were into, but I understand, like, not everything's for everybody.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Some of my best friends in the world have suggested me some terrible animes where I'm just like, I respect what you like, but it's not for me. I generally have a 3-episode rule with anime to where I can tell if I'm going to like something or not in the first 3 episodes. And there have been some that I've just kicked back to them like, no, keep those to yourselves, please.
One of the animes that I want to talk to you about is one that I'm familiar with in a cultural sense, because it's been around as long as, a lot of these mainstay animes that have been out there. And I know some names. I'm not familiar with other names. I don't really know the story, except that like fights go on for like 30 episodes from what I've heard, like similar to Naruto at times. And that is Dragonball.
Man, so I got started on Dragonball. It's some of my earliest memories. I remember going to Walmart and buying the VHS tapes and just watching them until those tapes broke. Like, it is such a huge part of my childhood, and even growing up into now with the latest incarnation of Super just having ended, I think, back in March of last year. So it's followed me through my whole life, and it's such a phenomenal show. Now, it hasn't necessarily, the animation doesn't necessarily hold up to a lot of the stuff of today, but I can still just binge through it anytime I get the opportunity because it's just really good I guess, storytelling just for fight scenes. Because who doesn't love a good anime fight scene?
I know, especially I come from the background of like Naruto as far as like fighting anime goes. So I definitely understand the 4 to 5 episodes of just like a singular fight. And sometimes I'm digging it, and sometimes I'm just like, "Can you just stop?"
So I think in Super, the Tournament of Power arc, it was a 48-minute tournament, and it lasted for 33 episodes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was like, it blows my mind to think that 48 minutes is just comprised of, I don't even know how long that is, like 10, 12 hours worth of media that I was watching week to week at the time. So it took me almost a full year to try to get through that with the breaks and everything that they took in between. So it was wild to have to wait on that for almost a full year to get through just one arc of a show.
For me, as far as like knowing it in the cultural sense that it permeates a lot of anime, and a lot of stuff, springs from Dragon Ball, or there's a lot of inspiration that comes from Dragon Ball. What is the actual story of Dragon Ball?
So the Dragon Ball story itself centers around Goku, who, depending on which versions of the show that you've watched, in the Americanized version of the show, Goku is just your standard shonen hero who bad people come to attack the planet and he's just got to save it. Or in the Super's version, he's literally trying to save the universe. Whereas in the Japanese version of the show, he just really wants to fight the strongest people in the world or in the universe. And that's what puts the universe, that's what puts it in peril most of the time. But no, it started out in Dragon Ball of him as a kid and just seeing him kind of grow up and learn martial arts and kind of figure out that he's not necessarily like most other people with his Saiyan heritage, because the Saiyans are a warrior race from another planet. And so it's him learning that he's not necessarily human like everybody else, and that's how he's able to adapt and get stronger a lot faster than most people who have trained their entire lives just to get absolutely schooled by a little kid with a tail. And then going into Dragon Ball Z, you figure out Goku see his actual heritage with the Saiyans, because he meets and then dies alongside his brother, and then he meets 2 other Saiyans, fends them off, goes to meet a bunch of Namekians, and probably my favorite villain in the entirety of anime, and Frieza, and becoming the legendary Super Saiyan due to one of his best friends being killed. And then they literally just managed to keep stepping it up from there, again in true like Naruto shonen fashion of like, okay, here's a power level, now here's another one and another one and another one.
I'm nodding along, just thinking about like how my experiences with the Naruto show is just like absolutely that, like, here's the base level. Okay, now we're bumping it up, and they keep, it just keeps going up. And yeah, I totally get that.
And then the entire time watching it growing up, I was like, okay, like surely there has to be a limit on how like powerful these characters can get. And then it depends on like what you believe as far as the show goes canonically. With after the end of Dragon Ball Z and the fight with Majin Buu, you have GT, which came right after, and I'm with the popular opinion of GT is terrible, but it brought us Super Saiyan 4, which is a really cool power up in and of itself. But then they decided to continue the story with films and Battle of the Gods and Resurrection F, which took place directly after the Majin Buu saga versus GT, which I think took place 17 years after the end. But with that, you actually got into like god powers and everything else. So it all just, now I'm just like, surely it can't go any further. Like there's no way.
Now, one of my questions, and I asked this as a person who knows not all the characters or their names, and I apologize about that. But there's a meme that always goes around on Father's Day with, I imagine it's Goku, because it's a young kid with a tail, hugging a green guy.
Okay, so that is Goku's son Gohan. And
Okay.
It's a running joke in the series of Piccolo, who's the green guy, is actually Gohan's dad, because he raised Gohan because Goku was dead. Goku spends a
Okay.
lot of time in Dragon Ball Z just dead. Because the show itself is called Dragon Ball, and it's because in the show they have Dragon Balls, which are orbs that when you collect all 7 of them, you can summon a magical dragon that can grant you wishes. And one of those wishes is you can bring people back from the dead. So that's how in this show, in the shonen version of, storytelling, they can bring someone back from the dead. So yeah, Piccolo basically raised Gohan and Goku's other son, Goten.
Well, now I know. Knowing is half the battle on that one.
There's a lot that goes on with that show.
At this point, there's got to be like hundreds of episodes.
So
spanning it.
Yeah, I think in Dragon Ball there's like 70 to 80-ish episodes. In Dragon Ball Z, I think there's 180, and then Super there's 131. So it's not quite on Naruto's level that between all incarnations. I think there's close to 900 episodes if you include Boruto in with it. Whereas Dragon Ball, you're sitting right at a clean, I think 350 to 360, give or take.
But let's be fair. Naruto had like 2 years of filler episodes that are mostly trash.
Yeah, I have heard that, and I've also heard that you can get away with not watching Naruto and just watch Shippuden because it's all backstory for the most part.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I did watch Shippuden for a few episodes, and I was like, I'm Naruto'd out at this point. I can't do it anymore.
So this is probably going to catch me a lot of flack, but I've never seen Naruto. I think I'm trying to watch it now after all these years, and I think I'm on episode 4 of the series.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying, just haven't made it there yet.
That is okay. Like I just happened into Naruto because a lot of my anime experience is from friends recommending me things, and then like me watching it with them, and then going from there. Like they'd always be like, "Oh, check out this. Oh, check out that," and that's where my anime background comes from.
And you see, I think for me, because I fell off on anime in about middle school, because that's whenever, for those of us weebs that really liked anime, if you were caught, you were going to be bullied extensively for it. So that's one of those things where it's like, okay, I got to blend in. I got to stop watching anime. Anime's not for me. And then that kind of carried over into seeing all the people running around the schools with Naruto headbands and whatnot. So I got to see it. So I was like, okay, yeah, I don't think Naruto's for me, because that fandom was really the most prominent in those kids who would do that type of thing. And so I guess that's why Naruto never really stuck out to me, because I guess it was just kind of that, repressed memories of middle school. But now me being an adult, and I'll talk to anybody and everybody about anime, strangers on the street. Like, I don't care. I'm not afraid to be myself now, to where, so I'm like, even though at the time, that might have got me made fun of, now I'm just like, okay, I don't see the problem with it. Everybody talks great about Naruto. Maybe I should give it a shot. So I'm trying it now. It's interesting. It's not, I realize the animation and everything on it is dated compared to a lot of the stuff that I'm watching now, but it's
right.
Like, it seems like a lot of fun. It seems like it could be something that I can get interested into, just as long as I take the time to sit down and watch it.
Now with Dragon Ball, how did you first fall into that? Because I know that there's different entry points for anime across the spectrum, whether it was like Toonami for some people or just, Blockbuster Video for others.
So funny you should mention Toonami and Blockbuster both, because it was actually both of them. Like, I remember waking up early on Saturday mornings and watching Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh! I collected all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards at the time growing up, because like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then Blockbuster, like, I have vivid memories of going to Blockbuster like every Friday and Saturday and picking out a DBZ and Sailor Moon film. And they were probably the same ones over and over again for all I know. But I enjoyed watching both of those. And that's just kind of how I got started. It was probably just Toonami, and it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, I was in high school when Toonami like kicked off, and so I'm real familiar with their like original stuff or the original lineup back in the day. But then when they started expanding and doing like hours and hours of like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning shows, it's like, no, not me.
And you see, I've always been more of a night owl, so I would always stay up late into like their Adult Swim hours and watch shows like Inuyasha and Yu Yu Hakusho and stuff that probably wouldn't necessarily classify as Adult Swim content now compared to some of the other
Mhm.
stuff that they have. But at the time, I was like, I shouldn't be staying up and watching this, but I'm going to.
But I'm going to. Yeah. I remember working at Blockbuster Video, and one of the things was like we would have that anime section in Blockbuster, but it's all of like maybe 10 videos or ten tapes. And like I remember looking at it and be like, man, there's barely anything here. But the downside is that videotapes on the most part, if they weren't being sold retail, like you had to pay $100 to rent them, and you look at how many people are renting anime, and it wasn't a lot for where we lived, so we never really expanded that much. And it's like, I know there's good stuff out there, it's just not coming.
And for us, it was mainly like the entire back catalog of DBZ and Sailor Moon films, because I think at the time there weren't a lot of like feature length films in America that we could get our hands on in general, besides like the huge titles. So I
Hmm.
remember whenever the first couple of Pokemon films came out on DVD or VHS, whatever it was at the time, I was like, ooh, expansions. I'm so happy.
Yeah, that was, man, that was the one thing when working at Blockbuster when Pokemon came out, was they always tried to have people watch them because we got to rent movies for free.
Mhm.
And you always tried to have enough people watch different things so that way you can talk to customers. So I was like, oh, I'll watch Pokemon, whatever. It's no skin off my back. And sure enough, like I got sucked in for the first couple seasons, or at least like the Johto run, and then after that I kind of fell out, and that's been my Pokemon experience with the exception of like the video games. But yeah, that and I remember when like certain anime movies first started coming into movie theaters, and it blew me away that could even happen
Mhm.
in the States.
And it's getting like, it blows my mind of how big it's getting now, to where my hometown is even starting to show like anime titles outside of like Dragon Ball and stuff like that. Like I remember the My Hero Academia film, the last one that came out, Heroes Rising, sold out weeks in advance.
Hmm.
And I had no clue. I had no idea. I thought it was going to be like everything else that came out around here, and there would probably be half an empty theater on release date. So I walk in to get a ticket, and they're like, "Yeah, we're sold out." And I'm like, "What? There's only one showing of this, and you're telling me it's been sold out for weeks?"
It is wild when you see the announcements for the anime movies that are coming out now, and it's like, okay, it's only for one day, maybe 2 days, one showing, that's it, that's all you're getting, and people go crazy over them now.
Hmm. And one of and it's my favorite film of all time. It's Makoto Shinkai's, not his latest film, but the film before, Your Name. It is, in my opinion, the most beautifully animated film that I've ever seen. And nowhere around me, except for theaters between an hour and a half and 2.5 hours away, was showing it. So I had to drive an hour and a half just to see it. And it was just me and one other couple who were there for its only showing. Where I was like, this is a shame. Like, it was such a phenomenal film, and it's now, I think, the number one selling anime film of all time. So it's just like, I don't see how that could happen from theater release, at least how I saw it, to that. But man.
It is absolutely something. I know that that's one of the movies on my list that I've been wanting to watch for a long time. And maybe I just don't know where to go to watch it, but eventually I will find it and watch it.
I think you can rent it or buy it anywhere that you want to. I highly recommend it. It is masterful storytelling. The sound design on it is some of the best that I've ever heard. The soundtrack, Radrimps did a phenomenal job with it. And it's just 10 out of 10, in my opinion. Like, I cannot speak highly enough of Shinkai's work.
Awesome. I know it's on my list, so I won't go further into like how much I want to watch it, but I do. As far as Dragon Ball goes, just out of curiosity,
Mhm.
if somebody new wanted to be like, I want to get into Dragon Ball, what would your advice be to them?
So it depends on about where you would want to start in the story. Because realistically, if you wanted to start with Super, if you wanted to go with something more modern, it gives you a recap on the first episode of everything that happens throughout Dragon Ball Z. Now, for me, I would always say start with Dragon Ball just so you can kind of like get to know Goku and who he is throughout the like just from the beginning. But I started with Dragon Ball Z. You kind of can't go wrong with it because it just starts off with incredible fight scenes and storytelling. If you like fight scenes, start with Dragon Ball Z and work your way up and make your way back to Dragon Ball at some point. Skip GT, don't watch it.
That is some good advice right there. Skip the things that don't make people happy.
Skip the stuff that most people don't consider canon, although at this point with the Dragon Ball fandom, what is and isn't canon is probably a bigger debate than what's good or bad about the show at this point.
Canon.
It's such a problem in the anime community over what's canon and what's not. It'll drive you nuts sometimes just reading what people think and talk about it.
Well, I come from a long line of fandoms where the community has to decide like what's canon and what's not based on the latest book or the latest movie or TV show. And it's just, okay, can we just enjoy it for a little bit?
Oh yeah, I understand that 100%.
One of the other fandoms that moving off of Dragon Ball and anime in general, but I'm sure we'll be swinging back to anime when we talk about the podcast. But one of the other fandoms that you're into is a almost like a very long running video game franchise. I remember working at Blockbuster, renting out the first titles, and I remember living in Japan when Snake Eater came out because that's all the trailers that they would show in the video game store would be the Snake Eater trailer over and over again. And I'm talking about Metal Gear Solid, but it's not a game that I've played. But again, that cultural like infusion from that game like permeates in like the video game sphere. I guess let's start off with how did you get into the Metal Gear franchise?
So I was really young, and again, I was way too young to probably be playing these types of games. But my uncle had a PS1, and so he had a copy of the original Metal Gear Solid. And so I used to watch him play it, and I was like, this is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, because the stuff that they tried to pull off at the time, I think the game came out in 98 or was released in the States in 98. So I remember like watching it whenever I was like 5 or 6 at the time. And I was just like, this is like the stuff that they pulled off was unheard of, because I remember playing Mario 64, Pokemon Stadium and all that, but those were kind of limited to what they were. And then seeing like fully like 3D environments and everything in Metal Gear Solid, I was like, whoa, this is incredible. And how it was all stealth based. Like it wasn't just run and gun or jump on Koopa's heads type thing. It was like a fully fleshed out storyline, and also the voice acting. It was that game that really got me into thinking like there's actual jobs where people voice these kind of things. And then it all just kind of spiraled out of control from there. I had a PS1, I played it. Then whenever 2 came out, played it. And then Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater is probably, it's not even probably, it is in my top 2 favorite games of all time.
That is high praise right there for Snake Eater.
Well, it just introduced so many elements with the camo index and the overall storytelling, and how for replayability, after you beat it, you unlocked more stuff, and then you could replay the game with everything you unlocked in your prior playthrough. So it was just a phenomenal experience. And then 4 was really good. It was the last time we got to see David Hayter as Solid Snake. And then 5, I don't know how to talk about 5. Because it was an experience for sure. It wasn't bad, and it wasn't necessarily good, but I guess it was a good tie-off for the series.
Okay.
But it was also really confusing.
Now, is Metal Gear finished as far as like the video game franchise goes?
I don't know, because whenever Konami and Kojima split,
okay,
it was because Kojima was the mastermind behind the Metal Gear games. So whenever he left, it turned into one of those things of Konami could potentially do another game. And they did with Metal Gear Survive or Survival. I can't remember. It wasn't a good game. And I think a lot of that was just because Kojima left. Now, if Konami was smart and wanted the money, they would remake all of the old Metal Gear games because I would pay $60 for Snake Eater itself. Like, just give it to me. Now, granted, I can speed run the game in about 2 hours, but I'll pay $60 for those 2 hours. Just give it to me, please.
That's the thing that I've noticed with a lot of these remakes that are coming out, specifically because I watched streamers play the Resident Evil remake that they did, and how beautiful it looks as opposed to my memory of the blockiness of Resident Evil games way back in the day. And it is something where you look at these games and you want those better graphics. Like, I look at another example, the Final Fantasy VII remake. I would love to get like Final Fantasy IV redone in that style, please. I would pay $60 to have that game in those graphics.
And it was one of those things to where there was a project that some fans of Metal Gear were doing a little while back. It was called the Shadow Moses Project, and they were taking the original Metal Gear Solid and remaking it in the Unreal Engine. And Konami actually sent them a cease and desist to get them to stop doing what they were doing. And to me, as a fan, but also, you know, knowing a little bit about the video game industry, I was like, I get where you're coming from. But at the same time, take what they're doing and just do it yourself.
Exactly. Like, you see that there is the desire out there for this game to be redone. Go ahead and do it. Like, because that's again, people have been asking for Final Fantasy VII for years, and then they showed it off as a tech demo for the PS3 back in the day.
I think so.
And then they just kept, you know, where is it? Why aren't we getting it? And finally, it materialized this year. But it's that there's just so much opportunity for these games.
And they kind of did a little bit whenever they just remastered 2 and 3 to where it could be playable on the PS3. And then they did the Legacy Collection, which I think was every game bundled together on the PS3 before they released Ground Zeroes and Metal Gear Solid 5 on the PS4. But even now, I'm like, could you just re-release that on the PS4 so I could play them all? Because as a streamer, I really want to be able to introduce my community to those games to where I'm sure a lot of them have never seen those games or have no earthly idea about the story. But for me, it's such a nostalgia trip, and I don't necessarily have the hardware to be able to show that to them without using emulators unless you just do that. And again, if you do it, I will pay you good money. It's just we have to have the opportunity to be able to get our hands on it. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that same way because Metal Gear, from most of the people that I've spoken to, is a very beloved franchise, no matter how, you know, kind of topsy-turvy the storytelling can be, considering how, you know, wonky they release the games.
Absolutely. I do have I got a curiosity question now, because it's one of the things I always hear about or see again in the meme universe of Metal Gear is a character named Raiden that's naked.
So Raiden was introduced in Metal Gear Solid 2, and the Metal Gear franchise before Metal Gear Solid 2 came out technically had 3 games under its title. You had Metal Gear, Metal Gear 2, and then Metal Gear Solid, and all of those were featured around the main character of the franchise called Solid Snake. And even the first part of the game had Solid Snake in it, and then you're introduced to a blonde-headed character that is nothing like Snake in any way, called Raiden, and he was just a very bland kind of character. And then you have the naked scene of him running around, holding himself, freezing, and that was an interesting section of that game, doing cartwheels butt naked, running around.
Oh my goodness.
It was I'm absolutely baffled by a lot of the stuff that Kojima does. Now, granted, I think he is a masterful storyteller in what he does. And he's the mastermind behind my favorite game franchise of all time, to where it's just like, I get it, but he's a character, man. I'm telling you.
What was this the game series where you could use a taser to kill someone or light them on fire?
I
I'm trying to remember if I'm misremembering or not, because there was one and I can't remember if it was this one or not.
I don't think so, or at least not to my knowledge. Now I know 4 had a stun knife to where you could stab people and then electrocute them with it. So, but I don't recall that being a thing.
It must be a different game then, because it is another stealthy game that was out around the same time as Metal Gear, I bet.
And it very well could be. It's just I don't remember. My
That's
memory
okay.
is so terrible at times.
Now, what is it about Solid Snake? Because in the list of things that I sent to all my guests, one of them is like, "Oh, who's your favorite character?" And Solid Snake is up there in your top 3 of who you listed, and I gotta know why he's like up there.
Because throughout the narrative that it tells in the game, like he is considered to be the world's greatest soldier, or at least he was cloned off of the world's greatest soldier. And yet he states after the first 2 Metal Gear games, like he doesn't want anything to do with what's going on and he wants out. But everybody in the story keeps saying, like, no, like you're meant to do battle and it's what you want to do. And it's just a real like subconscious like version of storytelling. And this man went through hell in a handbasket to do everything that he had to be the military's greatest weapon. And yet he, like the way he keeps his composure about things, and honestly, with it being nostalgia, I just thought he was cooler than all get out. But also, it's one of my favorite vocal impressions to do. It's something that I've always tried to like do and get good at. And recently streaming Metal Gear Solid 3, I was told that it was actually fairly decent. So I was like, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Well, don't leave me hanging. I don't know the voice, in particular, but maybe some people listening will.
So, and the only reason I have this line stuck in my brain is because it was the first line that we actually had from David Hayter in Metal Gear Solid 1. And I remember it vividly because I remember playing through this scene. And it's the earliest video game scene that I have stuck in my head. But you hear that iconic codec ringing sound. And then the first thing you ever hear from him is, "This is Snake. Colonel, can you read me?" And it's always stuck with me. And so I've always just tried to, at least to my best, recollection, try to recreate that and just get it down because it's stuck with me for so long.
That's awesome. And it sounded good because the only basis I have is from watching the Snake Eater trailers over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And that was ingrained in my brain for a long time.
And also that opening bit of after the end of World War II, the world was split into 2, East and West. This marked the beginning of the era called the Cold War. Like that part has stuck with me over the years too, because I've heard it so many times as I've played through that game.
It's funny how there's just things from those games that just stick in your mind. Like the experiences I had growing up at sleepovers playing video games with my friends, and like those moments will forever be in my brain about certain games.
Mm-hmm. And I still love to have couch gaming sessions with some of my best friends. Like I honestly have one planned next week just to go hang out and couch game and play Dragon Ball Z Fighters because my friends can't touch me at that game. So it's fun to just kind of tear them apart whenever it comes to that. And I think that's something that's lost in today's world. It's just like fun couch co-op sessions. And yet those are some of my most fond memories, like playing fighters and wrestling games and whatnot, just with friends sitting on a couch on a Saturday morning or 2 a.m. on a Friday night, just stuff like that.
Absolutely. Especially, pre internet gaming or matchmaking or what have you. We'd always play, like our games were like Super Smash Brothers or Mario Tennis or Pokemon Stadium, just all sorts of stuff. Mario Party, that caused some serious fights. Mario Party and stealing people's stars was a big issue for our group.
Oh yeah, that Mario Kart, like Rainbow Road, running people off the road and stuff like that. Like, I remember some stuff getting thrown over things like that. Like it's just such good times and such fond memories of stuff like that.
It is. Now, you mentioned as we were talking about Metal Gear Solid about streaming, and one of the things that we're going to talk about is you also stream on Twitch.
I do, and I don't do it as much now because life has kind of gotten in the way with everything going on and having just moved, trying to get adjusted to new job and new workload. But it's something that I want to get back into a little bit more heavily because I've been on the platform streaming now for, I think I just crossed my 6-year anniversary a couple months ago.
Oh, wow.
hmm
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been one of the greatest times of my life, just kind of playing video games and getting to know people, but very specifically this past, I think 14 to 15 months having to get to know Blue's community and be a part of it. Like I can't talk about a better time I've had on the platform because what I'm experiencing right now is like I can't ask for anything better. The community that I've built is absolutely wonderful, and the friends I've made are truly lifelong friends that I don't know what I would do without now.
So 6 years ago, what was the initial oomph to start streaming on Twitch?
Well, I've always been into content creating, or at least something like that on the YouTube platform since I was earliest able to. And now those YouTube videos are long gone and no one will ever be able to find them because I did my best to erase that. But and not only that, but I've always had a thing for commentary with games. That's something that my cousin has always told me is like I remember growing up, like you just always had a amount of charisma whenever you played and just wanted to talk about things going on and build a narrative even outside of the story that's going on just by that. He was like, it was kind of captivating in a sense to watch. So he's like, whenever you started streaming, he was like, I always thought that was a good thing for you to go for. And what got me into it was I got a PS4 and it had streaming built into it. So the first thing I ever streamed on the platform was Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, the prequel DLC to Metal Gear Solid 5. And so it just all kind of spiraled down here from there, I guess.
One of the things that I've found with being on Twitch, not only like because I stream very rarely at this point, I'm hoping to get back into it at maybe at the end of the year or maybe next year. But as a viewer, is finding the people who have built those communities to where not only are you a community on the channel, but you also have like a lot of the people now because it's a thing because there's Discord, and Discord is very much a very Twitch friendly platform, I guess I'd say. And having that community carry over to be there even when you're not streaming, it's so fascinating to see.
It is. It's been extremely interesting to see like how the platform itself has evolved over the past 6 years and how content creators that I knew whenever I first got on and seeing different amounts of growth and just how everything has changed. And then whenever Discord came around to like seeing the integration that it had and how it kind of streamlined a lot of the stuff for Twitch streamers and content creators like on YouTube and whatnot in general to make it more, I guess, like it made building communities and like kind of furthering friendships and I guess keeping like mod duties and everything a little bit easier. And ultimately just the communication aspect of it, it just streamlined so much and made it all just a whole lot easier to do. Like I'm very thankful for Discord and what it's done for my community and whatnot, because it's just turned into a outside platform just to be able to talk with people and just interact, and it's awesome.
When you stream, what kind of games do you stream, and how do you choose what you're going to stream?
I used to try to play games that I thought would, what I thought would do well, but at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily like. For me, it's not about the views at the end of the day. It's about having fun and being able to interact more with the viewers in chat. And that's honestly one thing that I really enjoy about the platform is instant feedback. So I don't want to play something that's going to take me away from being able to interact with viewers. But as far as what I normally play, The Last of Us 2 is taking up the vast majority of my stream time now. But outside of that, Rainbow Six Siege with friends, because I've always been an FPS boy at heart. I've always absolutely adored the genre. I was playing Call of Duty as far back as I can remember and schooling my entire family in that. That was fun times. But also Minecraft, Stardew Valley, like just really simple games like that. I say simple. Minecraft is not simple anymore.
That Minecraft blows me away because it's something where I remember it being released and it looked interesting. Now I have kids that play it, and they were talking last week. They're like, "Oh, there's a new update coming out," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And Stardew Valley, I have to say, is not a simple and easy game at all.
You see, I guess I found Stardew Valley simple because I grew up playing a lot of Harvest Moon back on the PS2. And so I absolutely adored those games. Like, I don't know what it is about having your own tiny little farm that you can like control and grow, but also the relationship building aspect of those games as well, because you can get married, make friendships, have kids and stuff like that. Like, it's a lot more in depth than what you think a simple farming game would be. And it's not simple by any means. And to get a lot of the cutscenes and whatnot in the game, you have to work for it. But it's
Hmm.
just so relaxing. And I even have the soundtrack to Stardew Valley downloaded on my phone because I just enjoy listening to it. Like, it's peaceful and nice and happy.
Yeah, I think for me in Stardew Valley, there's definitely issues because they don't really hold your hand. They're just like, here you go, figure it out. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Guide me.
There's a lot of trial and error with that game that I realized early on going into it. And I have bought multiple copies of that game for a lot of my friends because I wanted them to experience it. And then they come to me with tips, and I'm just like, figure it out. I had to waste your money. Because like my first time playing through the game, because I think on my Switch playthrough I have 250 hours just in one game. I think I'm on year 7 or 8 now. And it was my first playthrough I ever did on the PS4, and it was the last day of, I think, summer of my first year. I went and spent like 40,000 gold on crops. It was all I had on the last day. I don't think there's any crop in that game that can grow in a day. So I planted it. I was like, okay, I'm good to go. Like, surely they'll carry in the fall. No, they were all withered. I had no money. I was so broke. I was scavenging through all of the trash cans in town trying to get stuff to sell. I had to fish for like 4 days to get enough to buy crops in fall. I was just like, I have made mistakes.
It is a game. I still can't believe that one person made it to begin with, and then for that game to have so much content in it at this point.
And I'm honestly extremely excited for what they're making next, because they're making like a Harry Potter esque Stardew Valley coming up, to where you get to go to school to become a wizard and you get to go through all the like trials and tribulations of what a young Witcher wizard would go through. So I'm extremely excited to see where that's going. But back to what you said about all the content that's in the game, it has grown like exponentially through where it first started, and they just added new in-game content in the last massive update that I haven't even tried to see at this point just because I've been so busy. But I'm just like, that's incredible just to keep updating a game after so long. And Minecraft being the same way with that massive Nether update, to where it's just like, it just goes to show the kind of love that a community has for a game, to where they just want to keep it going.
Absolutely. And for them to do it free, like
Hmm.
just to put it out there, like it's not DLC where you have to pay money for. It's just here you go.
And I think like that's such an incredible thing to see nowadays, because I am the kind of person where I bought season passes for games. But I also remember the days of, you would get 40 to 60 hours on the disc that you bought. There was no extra downloading. Now, granted, if you got a bugged copy, you were kind of in trouble at that
Hmm.
point. But like, I remember the days before that, to where you didn't have to pay for an extra 20 or 30 hours of content. And again, I have absolutely no issues doing that now, especially for games like The Witcher, to where the DLC that you pay $30 or $40 for gets you an extra, 100 hours worth of content. But like having games that still do that for free, I'm just like, that's awesome to me, because I'm always a fan of more content, especially in games that I absolutely adore and have sunk more time into than I care to count at this point in my life.
I totally understand. There are the games when they come out, it's automatically I'll buy the game plus the season pass, because I know based on the game what kind of content I'm going to get, and therefore I know it's worth it. There are other games where I see it and I just shake my head, because I'm not paying for like, and I guess I can call out like Super Smash Brothers on the Switch, is that I don't need any extra fighters. It'd be cool to have them, but I'm not going to pay more money to have them. It's not something that I need to have in my life.
And I mean, especially with the massive roster that they already released in with Smash Ultimate, it's like, I don't think I need any of the extra ones. Now, they're cool. Like Joker from Persona, seeing him added in was a really nifty little addition, but that roster is already just so stacked full of people to where, yeah, like I didn't necessarily see buying the season pass myself like you, because I was just like, there's enough for me to do as is.
Now, on top of your content creating through Twitch and streaming on Twitch, you also, with Blue, started a podcast.
We did. BnB Anime is probably my favorite project that I have ever worked on. It's such a passion for myself, and I know it's something that Blue absolutely loves doing as well, just because it's an outlet for she and I to discuss a medium that we're both extremely interested in and looking to potentially pursue a career in, because voice acting is something that we've always both been passionate about. So being able to just talk about a medium and like be able to analyze it more and figure out stuff has been such an absolute blessing to be a part of. And I couldn't be happier with the podcast. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a massive learning curve trying to go through all the hiccups that come along with it, but it's such a fun thing to be a part of.
Now, you both went with the anime route because you both have the love of anime. What's kind of the setup for your podcast, as far as do you watch something and then discuss it? Do you just recommend things? Like what is the formatting for your show?
So we'll first go through all the weekly anime news that comes through, because you'd honestly be surprised about the amount of weekly news that's put out about anime. And then we'll give a short description of the show, and then we'll literally break it down episode by episode after we throw up a spoiler warning, because once we start talking about it, we don't stop outside of the random tangents we may go down. And then we'll give it a rating there at the end and give an overall discussion about it. We'll talk about the OPs and EDs, which on some shows are my favorite parts of it. Like Demon Slayer, that OP is just perfect in my eyes. I absolutely adored it. So just being able to talk about the anime as a whole, and then, like I said, at the end, rate it. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. We're just brutally honest about it.
How many episodes do you all have right now?
So we are up to 17 at the time of this recording, and then we'll be doing episode 18 right after this one.
Okay, awesome. And as we're recording at the end of June, but this episode won't be out until the end of August. So if you're listening to this, there will be more episodes out by that point as well.
We have our entire backlog of episodes up on our website at bnbanime.com, and you can find, we talk about any and every anime. We try to have a theme every now and then. Like August is going to be music month, because Blue and I both absolutely adore music animes, and a music anime is actually my favorite anime of all time. So it's nice to be able to discuss like such a, I wouldn't necessarily call it like an odd genre or subgenre, but it's like a niche slice of life genre. So being able to put a little bit of a spotlight on it is definitely something that I know we're both looking forward to.
What has been your favorite episode so far of your show?
So there was one week where we were scrambling to try to come up with something to watch because we weren't able to watch Kiki's Delivery Service because Netflix put all of the Studio Ghibli films on literally everywhere but Japan and the US.
Yes, they did.
So I had to scramble to find a VPN, and at the time I couldn't. So we're just like, okay, we got to find something quick. So we stumbled across a little anime called Tanaka-kun is Always Listless. It's an absolutely hilarious slice of life anime that we had absolutely no idea what we were going to get into, but I think I still have abs from watching that anime because it was such a laugh to watch through just somebody like working their absolute butt off to be as lazy as possible. And I realized the oxymoron that sounds like, but that's essentially what it was. And it was such a blast to watch. And I think we laughed basically through halfway of the podcast episode as well. So it's my favorite just because it's been just the most fun I've had recording one. But talking about Your Lie in April, which is my favorite anime of all time, was such a blast. We cried watching it. I think I cried on the podcast just talking about it. So they're all special to me. So I guess they're like children. They're all your favorites. But Tanaka-kun is definitely probably my number one out of the bunch.
When you're watching them, are you watching them together, but talking on like Discord or over just, or like doing one of those like party watching, or are you watching them and then discussing them on the podcast?
So the podcast is basically the first time that she and I will actually discuss them because we watch them on our own time, because with her living in Canada, she's in a different time zone, and we also have like both separate work lives. So our time is kind of separated to where really the only time we have to sit down and discuss things are whenever we sit down to talk about them. And so it's now, unless we're talking about it in each other's streams or messaging about it back and forth, like I know I'm very vocal about stuff. Like whenever something absolutely tickles me or pisses me off, I'll message her in all caps on Discord, like, what have you done? So, but outside of that, the podcast is the first time that we actually sit down to discuss stuff. So it's kind of, depending on whether we liked or hated the show, then sometimes it's a shock because we take turns picking what we're going to cover for the podcast. So I know with Blue being very heavy into sports animes, like I know she discussed Prince of Tennis on y'all's previous episode, to where she suggested a anime about diving to me, and I did not enjoy that one. But she had no clue until we actually got into it.
I was wondering if you kept it a secret and we're like, just wait until I drop my hot take on you.
Well, with that one, I had kind of discussed it with her beforehand. And then I think I ended up grading it like 4.5 by the time we got done talking about it. And then what was the last one that we watched? She suggested another sports anime, and I basically played her like a fiddle about it the whole time. Like I was in her streams like, ooh, we got something to talk about this next one, and didn't say a word. And then we actually got into the episode. I was like, I genuinely enjoyed it. Like it was a great time. So it's just kind of fun to be able to do that, but also get exposed to genres of stuff that I don't necessarily like, because our taste in anime are vastly different, and yet we're both finding new things that we really enjoy about the medium.
And that is a really awesome thing, not only just for the podcast and for the people listening to it, but for both of you just getting to experience things that you might not have gone out of your comfort zone to even watch to begin with.
Because my taste in anime is very varied, I guess, because I really like shonen anime like Dragon Ball and Demon Slayer and whatnot, but Blue and I both have an absolute love for an anime called Food Wars, and it's all just about cooking. And then Dr. Stone, which is about science. And then me, I absolutely adore sappy rom-coms. Like it's one of my favorite genres of anime to watch. And it's weird because I don't like watching sitcoms on television, like IRL real shows, but if you put it in an anime form, I will absolutely adore it. Like I don't get what's wrong with me whenever it comes to that kind of stuff. But it's just, to me, anime has always been a form of like, they just have the ability to do expressions that people just naturally can't. And I think that
Mhm.
adds like emotional value just as much as it adds humor, depending on what you're watching, because some of those faces are just top notch quality humor.
I will say about like the IRL sitcoms is that one of the differences that sprung out as you were talking is that there's no laugh track. Like they anime has to stand on its own without having like the force like, oh, they're laughing, so I should be laughing at this joke. Like
And that's one thing that I've seen too with sitcoms, because I'm actually a fan of How I Met Your Mother. But if you cut out some of the laugh tracks in the show, stuff doesn't hit as well and
mhm.
stuff like that. So it just kind of gives you a different perspective on stuff like that. Or I'm also a fan of watching music videos without the music. So you just get to see them like act a fool. And especially if there's a guitar, like they're just awkwardly hitting it. Like it's such a different thing to see whenever it comes to stuff like that, but it puts it in like a vastly different perspective.
What are some animes, either the movie or the show that you're looking forward to talking about in the future?
So we're actually going to be covering Food Wars on the podcast here very soon, because season 5 is starting up again after being delayed due to the pandemic. So we're really looking forward to discussing that, just because it's a show that you need snacks to sit down and watch, because the food is some of the best food animation you've ever seen, but it's also something that we really enjoy. But also, Music Month is something that I know we're both looking forward to, because my favorite anime of all time is a music anime, and then one of Blue's favorites is also a music anime called Kids on a Slope. So I know she's looking forward to talking about that, but also breaking out the tissues, because it's an emotional roller coaster. So there's a lot of stuff coming out that we're looking forward to covering. And also films. I know Violet Evergarden has a new film coming out in September, and Violet Evergarden is again one of my top 5 favorite animes, and I bawled my eyes out a lot over that show. So I'm looking forward to seeing that story continue on whenever the film drops in September.
Before we wrap things up, what is one anime that you would throw out there for people listening and say, if you haven't heard of it, you need to check it out. Here it is. Watch it now.
So I've talked about it a little bit already, but Your Line April. It is a absolutely stunning music anime. It's a story about a prodigy pianist who lost his ability to hear the notes that he plays due to some childhood trauma. So he has to learn like how to find his reason to play again. And it has its kind of like triggering moments. So if you're sensitive to a few things, like kind of go into it with an open mindset, because it does have some like content warning stuff in it. But if you can make it through like little bits of that, you'll laugh, you'll cry. It's only 23 episodes, so it's very bingeable, but the music is just top notch. I cannot recommend an anime more.
Awesome. Well, Brad, for people that have made it to the end of this episode and they want to find you or the podcast or streaming or anything that you do, what are the best places to do so?
So you can find me on Twitch at Brad Carter Gaming, and you can find all of my socials on our podcast website at bnbanime.com. And you can also find the actual podcast on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, basically anywhere that you get your podcast. But as far as Twitter is concerned, I don't have a personal one, but our podcast does at BnB Anime. I have an Instagram at Brad Carter Gaming, but also I run the podcast Instagram at BnB Anime as well, where not only do we post updates about the podcast, but also I like to post a lot of anime memes, because I get a kick out of them and I want to share them with the masses.
That's awesome. I will have all the links to the show note, or I'll have all the links to you and the podcast and the Twitch on my show notes and the Facebook page and the website. And Brad, I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on to this podcast and talk about stuff.
And David, thank you for having me. I am beyond thankful to have an opportunity to sit down and discuss some of my favorite topics with you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.